Good day, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Living on Purpose, the show about intentionally crafting the happy, successful life you deserve. I'm your host, Mark Barton, author of the Living on Purpose course and owner of Bought In for the Win LLC. If you find value in something in this show, please use the contact information to connect with me to discuss how happiness, success cycle based coaching or training can benefit you or your organization. Last week, I had the very fortunate experience of working with an amazing group of young people and want to say thank you to Embry Hills United Methodist Church just outside of Atlanta. I could not have been more thrilled with their enthusiasm and engagement as we piloted using the Living on Purpose course as a full weekend youth retreat. I was super happy with the outcome and cannot wait to work with them again and look forward to offering this to many more youth groups in the near future. Now, for some upcoming opportunities, if you are local to the Melbourne, Florida area, I have a local class starting on the 24th of this month. It will run every Tuesday from September 24th through October 29th. All sessions will be held at the Hub Center for Health and Beauty in Melbourne, Florida. Total cost is $295. That's only $29.50 per hour of training, a real bargain for some life-changing content. Please use the link in the info below or use the QR code on the screen to register. You can also contact me directly if you have any questions. Now, enough of the business matters. Let's get on with the show. In the last episode, we talked about finding motivations and specifically the importance of strong storytelling when we're trying to get motivated. This week, we're going to focus on one of my favorite topics, decision making. In the course, I use the OODA loop model created by Colonel John Boyd to help fighter pilots make better, faster decisions to help them win aerial dogfights. However, in this particular episode, I want to focus on other parts of this module, which is good judgment. Don't worry, I promise there will be a detailed episode covering the OODA loop in the future, but for now, you just have to Google it and do your best. When we talk about judgment, we're talking about making good decisions. Whether a decision turns out to be right or wrong is irrelevant in determining whether or not it was a good decision. As long as your values are always at the forefront of the decision, it should always be a good decision. If it turns out to be a wrong decision, you just learn where you went wrong and then seek self-improvement. So let's take a deeper look at some examples in the personal, organizational, and leadership levels when it comes to making good decisions. So the inspiration for this week's personal level of good decision comes from some notes I took during a sermon by Pastor Mark Reynolds at the First United Methodist Church of Cocoa Beach. Shout out to Pastor Mark, and if you are ever in the Cocoa Beach area on a Sunday, regardless of your faith or religious affiliation, make the time to stop by and listen. You won't be disappointed. So Pastor Mark is preaching a series on discernment, which by definition is good judgment, but it requires a little extra awareness. He spoke about being aware to the different ways God can speak to us. When I teach the OODA loop in the second O, the orient phase, we talk about awareness of your biases, such as cultural traditions, genetic heritage, and previous experiences. Being aware of these biases is a part of being oriented toward good values-based decisions. If we're going to make good decisions, we have to understand our predispositions. This also helps us not miss our cues that we are on the right track. So how do we really know if a decision is a good decision? As I said before, if the decision is in pursuit of your values, it's a good decision. Pastor Mark referenced asking the question, did the decision move me forward in a spiritually healthy way? I think we can expand that idea and include physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, or socially healthy way, depending on the kind of decision we have to make. Ultimately, all decisions that are good, values-based decisions should move you forward in a healthy way. You can also ask the question, did the decision enrich my values? Which is another way of saying, did it move the spirit of who I am as a person? These are just a few quick pulse checks you can incorporate into your daily life and daily decision making to assess whether or not your decisions are moving you in a positive direction. I could go on for hours about the topic of personal decision making, but I have a really cool experience to share about both organizational and leadership levels of exercising good discernment. Last week, I had the privilege of doing some community outreach to a wonderful organization called Tied Together. I'd like to take a quick second to thank Melbourne Regional Chamber of Commerce partner Glenn Outlaw for having me out with the event. Tied Together is a nonprofit that connects positive community figures, mentors, business owners, etc. with young men at local high schools by teaching them how to tie a tie, shake a hand, and hold a conversation. Some skills that are desperately needed in our society today. I look forward to more opportunities to participate in their events, not only for the chance to impact young people's lives, but the enriching experience it was for me as well. So you might be wondering, okay, what part of this is a good discernment at the organizational level? Well, there was actually a lot from what I saw. Organizational decision making can be rather difficult if the organization is not sound in their values. When the collective group is not in alignment with the organizational values, decisions, good or bad, become friction points. Last week, I saw an organization that had its values in line. I could feel the values emanating from each of the staff who spoke, and you could tell good discernment went into choosing who would be invited to the event. I was proud and honored to be with Tied Together and feel my personal values of motivating and empowering others were present from top to bottom throughout every interaction I had. Furthermore, there was more good decision making and discernment that went into how the event would go and what the focus should be. The organization is called Tied Together, but I can assure you the piece of cloth is not the most important part of the event. The small but meaningful ties made with each of the young people and passing along good discernment to them was the focus, as it should be. To make things even better, the message to the young men from the guest speakers was another iteration of practicing good discernment. My point is, it's kind of special to see an organization operate so thoroughly on its values and practice what they preach. This is also a sign of good leadership. But let's look at another example of practicing good discernment that comes from the youth retreat last weekend. This week's practical application of applying living on purpose at the leadership level comes from the youth retreat last weekend. Huge shout out to Miss Georgia Thrasher, and I hope you don't mind me sharing the story, but it's just a really cool example of putting your values first as a leader. So Georgia had a scheduling conflict as she had a cross-country meet on Saturday morning that conflicted with the youth retreat. I was not expecting her to join us on Saturday until sometime around midday, so you can imagine my surprise when she showed up around 9:30 or so. Pay very close attention to what I'm about to tell you because we can all learn a lot from the discernment this young lady made to resolve this conflict. Georgia had to decide between her commitment to the youth group and her commitment to her cross-country team. She made a very mature and values-based decision and opted to run at an earlier time with the JV racers, knowing she would not receive a qualifying score for that particular meet, and that she would really only be racing for the training and to improve herself, and maybe get a new PR. Georgia used her good judgment and put her values first and knew that while it was important for her to attend and participate in the cross-country meet, her fellow youth needed her and her leadership more. Deciding between difficult commitments as a leader can be one of the most difficult decisions we face. There are values on both sides of the decision. The way to practice good discernment in our decision making as a leader is to always put the needs of those we lead ahead of our own, just like Georgia did. This is not to say that we should always suppress our own values in pursuit of taking care of others when we're a leader, but more so, make sure that our values are in line with the groups that we lead. This will ensure that when we exercise good judgment in our decision making is not only in the best interest of the subordinates in the organization, but should be enriching to us as well. Thanks again, Georgia, for your amazing practice of good decision making and discernment at the leadership level. Thanks for joining me this week and hopefully learned a few ways you can improve your decision making process and also make sure that you're making good decisions by putting your values first and exercising discernment. Evaluate some decisions you've made recently or some that you may be currently working through and invest some time in yourself this week to see where you can exercise discernment and make good decisions because if you aren't bought in, you sold out.